evening. Welcome to the second edition of the new Thursday on the Edge with me, Theo Chalmers. We are live, so if you have any comments, questions or suggestions during the show, text them to 87778. Send the word EDGE, a space, and then your message, and we'll try to pick up on any that really hit the mark. Please try and include your name and location. All text messages are charged at your standard rate. Our programme tonight is about what happened on September 11th, 2001. We'll be showing clips from the seminal film 9/11 in Plain Sight. If you're one of those people who believe the official story of that day, then you'll definitely want to stay tuned. To talk about the film live via telephone from the home of the brave, land of the free, is William Lewis, who directed and produced the film. In the studio, I'm delighted to have Joe Quinn, editor of the Sign of the Times website. I'm sorry, that's Signs of the Time. And co-author of 9/11, The Ultimate Truth. And I've also got former investment banker Simon Davies, who is collaborating on a book about government false flag operations called From Belfast to Baghdad. What a show we've got tonight. Welcome. Welcome to you as well, William Lewis, if you can hear me.
Thank you.
William, I think we'll start with you, just in case we lose the line. We had some problems earlier on. William, you made this film, 9/11 in Plain Sight, which I'm just showing the camera, which I think is pretty amazing, actually. I'd like to ask you, how did you get involved in the 9/11 truth movement?
Well, it was not intentional. It was just something that came about as a result of having information in our hands or in our possession that we felt that we had to give to people. It had already begun to kind of pull apart the Pentagon story. That was all based on information that we had that Le Pentagate, which was a French website, which discussed all of the themes. Why was there a hole in the wall that was too small to accommodate a 757, things of that nature. And we had been in contact with Phil Jahan, who discovered the flash and was telling us about the pod. And then we found out that we were in possession of approximately 2 or 3 dozen videotapes that people had sent us over the years, and it all added up to, all of the intricate details of everything that came out that day. We went back, started looking at the footage, and realized we've got stuff people have never seen before. You may have seen it once live on TV, but you didn't get to see it again. So we began to sift through all of this footage, put it together with the Pentagon story, put it together with, the flights, Flight 11 and Flight 175 that hit the North and the South Tower. And, by the time we reached the end of the story, we were just trying to point out inconsistencies in the official government story. And by the time we reached the end of the documentary, we realized we had just blown a big hole in the whole story.
Well, William, we're going to look at those things tonight. We're going to look at some bits from your film. And I think, really, if we can go to the first clip, please, which is about the Pentagon, that'd be a good place to start. So if we can show that film now, please. It might take you a couple of seconds to launch into that first one. Can we go there?
It was like a cruise missile with wings. Went right there and slammed right into the Pentagon. Huge explosion, a great ball of fire, smoke started billowing out.
Shortly after September 11th, as what usually happens, many conspiracy theories began to emerge as to what really happened on September 11th of 2001. And because many of these theories were not grounded with any evidence, we didn't really pay too much attention to them. However, in February of 2002, my attention was drawn to the following website, entitled Hunt the Boeing, Test Your Perceptions. Now, the original website was completely in French and was released by the French and drew some very serious questions as to what had really happened at the Pentagon. I mean, after all, we had all seen the big hole that was created by the 757 that had slammed into the Pentagon at 9:43 on September 11th. But some of the photographs that were shown on this website raised very serious questions as to whether or not that's exactly what had happened. Some of these photographs showed a smaller hole, and in some cases showed that there was no way that a 757 could have created this damage. So we began our own investigation, and that started by taking a look at some of the magazines that we all saw at the supermarket checkout stands shortly after the events of September 11th. As I began poring through the photographs, I had one goal in mind, and that was to prove the French wrong with their website, Hunt the Boeing. After all, there must have been some photographic evidence that showed that a 757 had hit the Pentagon. But as we went through all these photographs, we could find no pictures whatsoever showing a tail, a nose, a fuselage, wings, engine, wheels, luggage, seats, nothing. There were no photographs showing any recognizable wreckage from a 757. Furthermore, when you look at the size of the hole at the Pentagon, it was approximately 65 feet across, and the height of the Pentagon is approximately 73 feet. From wingtip to wingtip, a 757 is 124 feet 10 inches. From nose to tail, a 757 is 155 feet and 3 inches in length, and the height is 44 feet and 6 inches. However, when you look at the hole at the Pentagon, you'll find that it's only approximately 65 feet across. How does a plane of those dimensions fit into a hole only 65 feet across? Upon further inspection, we found that the damage at the Pentagon was completely and totally inconsistent with the damage of the planes that had hit the World Trade Center. I mean, after all, the planes that hit the Trade Center created a fire so intense that it fatigued the steel and collapsed the buildings, or so that's what we were told. And yet, when you look at the left side of the Pentagon, you'll note that there is very little, if any, smoke damage or heat damage at all. On the third floor, it's very plain to see a file cabinet with a computer monitor. Neither of them are damaged. On the second floor, you can see a wooden desk. It hasn't burned. And on the first floor, a very curious sight indeed, a wooden stool with a book that is laying and open. The pages aren't even singed. Now, each of the planes involved in the September 11th attacks had embarked upon transcontinental flights, which means that they had a majority of their fuel left over when they hit their respective targets. That means that approximately 8,600 remaining gallons of fuel would have been ignited on the 757 that had hit the Pentagon. Again, we look at the photograph and ask ourselves, is the smoke and heat damage consistent with that amount of fuel being ignited?
Well, William, I mean, that's incredibly powerful, isn't it? That I'm sure you recognize that piece of your film, even though you can't see it with us. When you found these images and looked at these facts, I mean, did you feel that you had a kind of moral duty to make this film? Is that the thinking behind it?
Absolutely. That's why we help people don't worry about copyrights. Just get this thing and make copies of it in your DVD player and get it out to other people. And really, I think that's how the message began to spread so quickly. You know, we had reports back from some people that had made literally hundreds of thousands of copies that they were giving out for free. So we were thrilled to find out that this information was getting out to people. You know, I don't think the American people quite get it, that this September 11th, terrorist attacks have been used to lull the American people into a sense of fear and fright, and we've got to act, we've got to do something, and they've been tricked into going to war in other countries. First strike wars, where we're the aggressor, we're the people going in, starting this stuff, you know? I don't believe the American people really and truly understand that we're not looked upon very favorably around the world, and the whole excuse that's being used to trick the American people is this episode of 911.
Well,
this television show, this soap opera.
Yeah, well, that's very passionately put, William. I really appreciate that. I'm just going to tell the audience that we are, in fact, going to give your film 9/11 in Plain Sight its television premiere here on this channel, Channel 200, Edge Media Television. I'm not sure of the date yet, but stay tuned and you will see it on this channel in full. I'm just going to go to Joe Quinn now. If you can stay on the line, please, William, because there are some other questions I want to ask you. Joe, you're very familiar with this subject. You've written this book here, 9/11, The Ultimate Truth. With Laura Jadczyk. Did I say her name right?
Jadczyk, yep.
Thank you, Jade. I said it
Good
wrong,
enough.
didn't I?
Close enough.
Anyway, give me a bit of your kind of feeling about what we just saw and where did that plane disappear to and how could that... Is there any rational, logical explanation for what we just saw? Could it have been a 757 jetliner, loaded up with passengers, loaded up with fuel, with jet engines that are 9 or so feet across, hitting that building?
It's very unlikely, to put it lightly. There's no, as we saw in the video, there's no marks. The width of the hole was at most 90 feet wide, and a 757 is 125 feet wide, and there are no marks on the sides of the buildings at where the planes of the wing, the wings of the plane would have had to have hit if it was a 757 plane. So obviously, on that point alone, you would have to say that the suggestion that a 757 hit or Flight 77 hit the building is unlikely.
Okay, I've just been told from the gallery that we're showing 9/11 in plain sight on Wednesday, I've forgotten the date, 22nd of October at 8:30 p.m. So please tune in for that. And thank you very much, Joe, for that point. Actually, I think we'll go to Simon Davies now, because you're writing a book about false flag operations. So the question I'm going to ask you is this. If 9/11 was, let's say, not as presented by the media in this country and in America, and we're going to show lots of other clips as well, so we're going to have more of this stuff throughout the programme, so please stay tuned. And please send in your texts. Who benefited? Who benefited from this, and why would they do this? Why would they kill? Say it was, let's just suppose for a moment, say it was the American government who killed 3,000 of their own people and foreigners from almost every country in the World Trade Centers. How would they benefit?
Well, I think we have to sort of define who we mean by the American government, because I think it's likely that it was a small part of the American government, a group associated with the Bush administration, acting alone. Some might call them rogues, some might refer to them just as the neocon group, however you want to refer to them. They get carte blanche as a result of this. There's a significant history. We've got Lusitania, Pearl Harbor, of attacks occurring that were either facilitated or at least allowed to occur to get the American people behind what would otherwise be completely unacceptable foreign policies.
Let me just ask you, you mentioned Pearl Harbor. Pearl Harbor was an attack on the American Navy by the Japanese.
Yeah.
So that wasn't self-done, that wasn't terrorists with box cutters, was it?
No, it wasn't, but there's absolutely massive amount of evidence to say that it was provoked. The defence that would normally be put in place to allow Pearl Harbor not to have occurred was deliberately removed. Key assets were not in Pearl Harbor that would normally have been in Pearl Harbor. Defensive patrols that should have been there were not there. And a mountain of communications, information and intelligence that should have been made available to the admirals and the military in Hawaii was not provided to them and was stalled in Washington deliberately so that the attack could take place. There would be sufficient loss of life, sufficient shock among the American public, and the Second World War, the entry of the United States into the Second World War, would be facilitated by that action.
Okay. I've got a question here coming in on the text. Somebody here, Malcolm at Lincoln, has asked, why was the grass still green in front of the Pentagon? William, would you like to take that one?
Well, there's a lot of theories about why the grass is still green in front of the Pentagon. If a plane were to come in at the altitude that we were told it came in, we would have seen some type of ground damage. We've seen experiments where they've done this with cars, and you see them fly very low over a passageway, and you see these cars literally being flipped onto their sides. There's a tremendous amount of pressure built up as the plane passes by, and it dislodges everything in its path. And, the very fact that we don't have a clear picture, video evidence of a plane striking the Pentagon is even more fascinating. The photographs that they released after the fact don't even show a plane. These are the images they say prove that a plane hit the Pentagon, yet you don't see a plane.
There's no images, is there? William, we've got a couple of minutes before the break. I've got just enough time to show clip 3, which I think shows a bit more detail what the plane is supposed to have done to the Pentagon. So if we can see clip 3, please, before we go to the break. Hello, up there, please.
Keep in mind that each ring of the Pentagon has an outer and inner wall, each wall approximately 18 inches thick of steel-reinforced concrete. That means that each ring consisted of 36 inches or 3 feet of steel-reinforced concrete for a total of approximately 9 feet of steel-reinforced concrete. Question: could a 757 have pierced 9 feet of steel-reinforced concrete and left a 14 to 16-foot hole and no wreckage? If not, what could have created that type of damage? On our radio program, The Power Hour, we have a lot of veterans and military experts that listen in, and many have called up and agreed that it could not have been a 757 that created that damage, but in fact had to be something else altogether. What could have caused that damage? Some call it a bunker buster or a missile.
Joe, do you want to pick up on that point here?
Yeah, it's a ridiculous contention that that hole in E-ring was made by...
That was the inner hole, wasn't it?
Yeah,
we saw
after,
in that image just then.
Yeah, 3 rings in on the Pentagon.
3 rings in,
according
so
to
9 feet of concrete.
Yeah, according to Donald Rumsfeld, that was made by the nose of the 757.
Which is made of aluminium.
Yeah, and very
that's aluminum, William.
Yeah. So, I mean, a lot of military experts and weapons experts have suggested that could only have been made by a missile or a shape charge that makes that kind of perfectly round hole.
Good point, okay.
Was that?
Yeah, no, that was really good, but we're going to go for a break now. Right, we're going for the break. If you'd like to text in your questions or comments, why not do so now? Just send EDGE, a space, and then your message to 87778. See you very soon. Thank you very much. Welcome back to On the Edge, and tonight we're talking about 9/11 in plain sight, the film. We've got the director-producer on the line from America, William Lewis. We've got Joe Quinn, editor of Signs of the Times, I'll get it right one day, SOTT.net, and co-author of 9/11, The Ultimate Truth, in the studio. And we've also got Simon Davies, a former investment banker who knows that thing from the inside, and co-author of From Belfast to Baghdad, a book which is coming out about false flag operations. And just before the break, he was talking about false flag operations, so I think we'll go back to you, William, if you'd like. Give us a bit more of that. I'm sorry, Simon.
That's right.
Give us a bit more about...
Yeah, you were asking about this, the hole.
Yeah.
And not only do we have a very small hole that is completely inconsistent with the theory of a 757, but we have the Pentagon, which has to be one of the most highly protected buildings in the world. Not only does it have incredible surveillance, but it also has incredibly sophisticated air defense systems.
So you mean they would have fired a missile?
Yeah, they'd have shot it down.
757 heading for it.
Well, somebody had to stop that happening. Now, it either was deliberately overridden, or the system regarded whatever was coming in as a friendly object, and that had to have been programmed into it. So that's sort of an absolutely key point, that all these systems didn't work. The other thing is, this building has incredible surveillance. Every corridor, every wall, every roof, everything of the Pentagon is under camera surveillance.
So if they wanted to, they could show us film of the plane in slow-mo penetrating these 9 feet of steel-reinforced concrete and not burning any books or anything.
Yeah, exactly. And the wings folding up and the engines tucking themselves away and the luggage evaporating and all the things that would have had to have happened. Right,
OK. Well, let's go to clip number 2, because we're still on the Pentagon for a little bit. Then we're going to go to New York, and I've already got a couple of questions about New York, but if you save the questions for New York, it's a little bit later. But right now we're doing the Pentagon, so if we can go to clip 2 now, that'd be great. Thank you very much.
But shortly after the release of the article From Deception to Revelation, we were sent some photographs that were taken apparently right after the event and before the outer walls had collapsed. When examining these photographs, we can clearly see that the area in question had not yet collapsed. In fact, there is very little evidence of a hole big enough to accommodate a 757. The hole that we do see is approximately 14 to 16 feet across. Question: how does a 757 fit into a 16-foot hole and leave no damage or wreckage on the outside of the Pentagon? These are questions that deserve serious scrutiny. Let's take a look at some of the photographs that were taken before the outer wall of the Pentagon collapsed. In this first photograph, we can see the firefighters pulling the hoses away from the fire truck. In the foreground, we can see wire spools that were left on the front lawn of the Pentagon. After all, this section of the Pentagon was under renovation. We'll use these wire spools as reference points. Also, to the right of those wire spools and on the face of the Pentagon, we can see that some concrete facing has broken away. We'll also use this as a reference point as we examine these photographs. Now, to the left of that area where the facing has broken off, we can clearly see that the Pentagon has not yet collapsed. There are some flaming areas, and that area appears to be the only section where there is a hole approximately 14 to 16 feet. Question: how does a 757 fit into a 16-foot hole and leave no wreckage on the front of the building? We can also see that the roof of the building does show fatigue, but has not yet collapsed. In this photograph, an astonished onlooker sees exactly what we're seeing. The Pentagon had not yet collapsed. And again, there is no sign of any wreckage whatsoever. No tail, no fuselage, no wings, no wheels, no engines, no seats, no luggage, nothing on the outside of the Pentagon. Pentagon roofline is clearly visible, and again, it is under fatigue, but it had not yet collapsed. As we examine this next photograph, let's take a good close look at the lower left corner. You'll see engine 331 from the Metropolitan Washington Airport Authority, and we contacted the fire chief from this engine company. Chief Plower agreed to come on our radio show along with 2 of his firefighters, but 1 hour before airtime, they canceled. We were told that the 2 firefighters had been placed on indefinite leave. When we look at this photograph, we can see that the fire retardant foam is being sprayed on the front of the Pentagon, and again, the area in question had not yet collapsed. And you can see, right in the center of the photograph, a big area where some of the concrete facing has broken away, and it appears that this is the only major hole in the front of the Pentagon. Again, is this hole big enough to accommodate a 757? And where is the wreckage? In this photograph, we again see engine 331 and fire retardant foam being sprayed on the front of the Pentagon. Note clearly, in the center of the photograph, we see the upper floors of the Pentagon, again, yet to collapse. But also notice that there does not appear to be any damage to these upper floors.
Right, William, no doubt you've heard that. I've got some questions here, which I think I'll put to you if you don't mind. One of them is, if it was a 757 that hit the Pentagon, why only show a few frames of footage, and why confiscate CCTV video from gas stations and hotels? That's, I don't know who sent that message, but thank you for that. I've also got another one here that says there's a clip on YouTube of a camera on the Hilton Hotel which shows it wasn't a plane. I'm not familiar with that. Are you familiar with that, William?
No, I haven't seen that. You know, I'm not sure they would have actually got footage unless it was smuggled out of the FBI, because the FBI has possession, I believe, 84 videos at this point that they will not release because they say it's a matter of national security. It's funny that they can put one out every once in a while whenever they need to disprove, whatever the conspiracy theorists are saying at the time. But to be quite honest with you, it would really quiet the whole 911 truth movement. It would just, if they would just release the videotape and show us that it was a Boeing 757, but I don't think it can, because I think you and I both know it wasn't a Boeing 757 that hit the Pentagon.
Well, I've got to say, it does seem rather unlikely, having seen what we've just seen. So who can call the American government, if you like, to account? Who can say in America, let us see those clips? Why is nothing happening? That's what I don't understand.
This goes all the way up to the president. You'll remember it was at his request that the networks began to stop showing all of the footage of the collapse of the buildings and anything that would remind them of 911. They only bring those up when they need to get reelected. You'll notice all of the scenery at the Republican National Convention was nothing but images that reminded people of September the 11th. So they bring it up when it's convenient for them, but they won't release this information. This is what it boils down to: is they have 84 videos in their possession that they won't let us see. They keep telling us to swallow the official story. We keep poking holes in the official story. So somewhere along the line, it's got to break. To be quite honest with you, they don't have to do anything, and I don't that anything will ever actually be done. We may never get another investigation.
Doesn't the power rest with the people?
Yeah, well, it's too, isn't it? But they've used September the 11th to systematically remove one right, one liberty after another you know, you go back to the USA Patriot Act that they passed right after this, and it violates our First Amendment, our Fourth, Fifth, Sixth, Eighth, and 13th Amendments right there. One bill that no one read before they passed, and it was switched at the last minute.
Well,
You know?
well, that's powerful stuff. William, we're going to switch now to clips from your movie, which are about New York, because otherwise we're not going to have time to show them. So if we can roll clip number 5, please, that would be really good.
In the September 24th, 2001 edition of People magazine, on page 34, there was an interview with Louis Caccioli, a 51-year-old firefighter assigned with Engine 47 of Harlem, New York, and he had this to say. We were the first ones in the second tower after the plane struck. I was taking firefighters up in the elevator to the 24th floor to get in position to evacuate workers. On the last trip up, a bomb went off. We think there was bombs set in the building. Well, Louis Caccioli isn't the only firefighter that claims that there were bombs or explosives going off in and around the World Trade Center.
We made it at least 2 blocks, and we started running. Floor by floor, it started popping out.
It was if they had detonated.
Yeah,
If they were planned to take down a building. Boom, 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 boom.
All the way.
Joe, talk to me about this.
Yeah, the holes in the U.S. government's 9/11 conspiracy theory, because that's what it is.
It's their conspiracy theory.
Well, they have a conspiracy theory.
It's not the conspiracy theorist conspiracy theory, it's the U.S. government's conspiracy
Well, no,
theory.
there are two 9/11 conspiracy theories.
Okay.
Right. A conspiracy being that a group of people conspired together to carry out the 9/11 attacks.
19 people.
The government's
with box
conspiracy
cutters
theories
or
is
Stanley
that,
blades.
and the alternative conspiracy theory is that it was the U.S. government themselves or a faction therein.
Okay.
So yeah, there are so many holes in the evidence for their conspiracy theory that it's laughable, and a much better and more believable, with much more evidence to back it up, is the alternative 9/11 conspiracy theory, which is that it was the U.S. government themselves.
Which we see in this movie.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there is so much documented evidence that there were bombs going off in the World Trade Center towers before the planes hit. Above where the planes hit, below where the planes hit, and that, I mean, it seems beyond doubt that those towers were demolished.
Well, they fell in 10 seconds. Is
Yes.
that possible?
It's only...
With aviation fuel as the only propellant, if you like.
Well, logically, no. It seems that the only way that they could have fallen in more or less free fall speed was if they were brought down, if all of the resistance below was immediately and removed by explosives. And also there's World Trade Center 7, World Trade Center 7.
Right, now World Trade Center 7...
wasn't hit by any plane, was a 46-story building, had a few isolated fires, and it just, 9 hours after the attacks, it just decided to do the same thing. Well, maybe in solidarity with the two towers. It just decided to collapse all by itself as well.
We've got a clip about that. Can we show number 6, please? While I try and fix my
Let's
mic.
listen to a clip from Larry Silverstein. He was the lease owner of the World Trade Center as he gave an interview on PBS.
I remember getting a call from the fire department commander telling me that they were not sure they were going to be able to contain the fire. And I said, you know, we've had such terrible loss of life. Maybe the smartest thing to do is pull it. And they made that decision to pull, and then we watched the building collapse.
Now, we've just heard Larry Silverstein making the admission that when it came to Building 7, the decision was made to pull it, a term that is used by demolition experts in bringing a building down.
Well, Joe, there's your Building 7.
It just, no, the official 9/11 Commission report, well, it ignores World Trade Center 7, actually. It doesn't really address why it fell or that it fell at all. But as you say, or as we've seen in the film, Larry Silverstein knew or knows why it fell. It was deliberately brought down with explosives. And what can you say about it?
And interestingly,
Sorry.
the BBC announced its collapse 25 minutes before it
Yeah,
actually
if you
came
check
down.
on YouTube, there's a video of a BBC presenter saying that we've just heard that World Trade Center 7 has collapsed, and in the background, World Trade Center 7 is still standing.
So it looks like the press release went out a bit early, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's just a bit in a rush.
We're getting quite a lot of text here. It says here, I don't believe a plane hit the Pentagon, but why kill their own people to blame the Muslims? Who I am not a supporter of same... Oh, I'm sorry, that doesn't make an awful lot of sense to me, but I take your point, so...
Why?
Yeah, why?
Well, first of all, who did they kill? And it's very interesting who they did kill in the Pentagon. They killed people in the Office of Naval Intelligence and in the Office of Defense Accounting. Defense Accounting announced, in fact, Donald Rumsfeld announced the day before 9/11 that there was a $2.3 trillion hole in the Pentagon's budget, and they didn't know where it had gone.
Just $2.3 trillion?
Just $2.3 trillion. Nowadays, of course, that's just one bank rescue, of course, but, you know.
No, it isn't. It isn't that big, is it?
No, it's not that big. But then it was a lot of money. It was a lot of money in those days.
$2.3 trillion.
So, you know, that was that one.
So...
And the Office of Naval Intelligence has historically been the most powerful intelligence organisation in the United States, and is basically a known enemy of the neocons and their faction within the CIA and the NSA.
So it's infighting is what you're saying.
Exactly.
But the obvious reason why they would kill their own people is to garner public support, public outcry, public anguish that could then be used to back a war against Muslims, as the viewer asked. But not so much against Muslims, but against the fact that a lot of Muslims live on land that the US government is kind of partial to acquiring for itself.
For strategic reasons.
For strategic reasons.
Okay.
And
let me just tell everybody, if you want to send in a text, send it to 87778, text the word EDGE, then a space, then your message. If it's too long, it gets chopped off, I'm afraid, so short messages are better. Thank you very much. We're going to go and see another clip now. I've only got 47, so we're not going to see another clip, before the break, that is. William, can you give us a bit of insight into Building 7? You know, there have been people saying that it was brought down by the flames of fires that were burning as a result of the World Trade Center. Is that possible?
Well, if it were possible, it's never happened before, except for Tower 1 and Tower 2 that it felt, you know, earlier in the day. This is the thing, you know, when it first happened, that very first day that it happened... Okay,
William, I've got to break you now. We're going for another break. Once again, if you'd like to text in your messages, do it soon. See you after the break. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, bye. Welcome back to On the Edge, and tonight we're talking about 9/11 in Plain Sight, the film about what may really have happened on September the 11th, 2001. We're going to go straight to another clip from the film, which, by the way, we're showing live here. I beg your pardon. We're showing the film for its UK television premiere on the 22nd of October. That's 22 October at 8:30 p.m. That's well worth watching. But here's another clip from it.
On April 15th of 2004, we received a news release that alerted us to a website that was entitled www.letsroll911.org. Phil Jahan, the webmaster for this website, had taken the video clips that you've just seen and slowed them down and examined them frame by frame, and what he found was astounding. There are several different anomalies that need to be examined and questioned. First of all, what is attached to the bottom of the plane that hit the South Tower? And second of all, what is that brief flash that occurs just as the plane makes impact? Now, when we first looked at this video footage, I said to myself, well, this video footage could very well be manipulated. So I wanted to check it out myself. Well, we went and found the DVD that we had purchased shortly after September 11th entitled America Remembers. This was directly from CNN. We took this DVD and put it in our machine and examined the very clip that you've just seen. Let's take a look at it. Let's take another look at this clip in slow motion, but before we do, keep in mind that sometimes the best place to hide something is in plain sight. We've all seen this video clip, and there have been many publications that have taken frames from this video and published them in hundreds of magazines. Here's an example. On page 3, a full-size blow-up of this picture. And in this magazine, it was published on page 4. And on the back of this book that we discussed earlier, it's on the back cover. I suggest you all take a copy of your magazines and books, and if you have the video footage, take a good hard look. We've all got this. Now let's take a look at this in slow motion. As the plane approaches the South Tower, notice carefully the belly of the plane. There appears to be something attached, and just as it hits the building, there's a flash. Let's take another look in super slow motion. Let's look at this photograph that was taken near Ground Zero. On the right, we see the South Tower, and the smoke that's rising into the sky is emanating from the North Tower, which is completely hidden from view. On the left, just entering the field of vision of the camera, we see the plane just before it hits the South Tower. Note a couple of items here. The engine on the right wing has a shadow, and the shadow moves towards the front of the plane and off of the plane. So the anomaly that appears to be attached to the belly of this plane could not be caused by a shadow. Also note that the item that appears to be attached to the belly of this plane is on the right side. This plane has something that is not symmetrical on the bottom of the plane. When we compare that with the bottom of a regular 767, we'll note that a normal 767 has a belly that is smooth. This plane does not. In the summer of 2003, in Barcelona, Spain, a publication by the name of La Vanguardia did an investigative report on the plane that slammed into the South Tower. After a thorough digital image analysis performed by a Spanish university, the investigators came to the conclusion that the anomaly was three-dimensional in nature and could not have been caused by shadows or reflections. Question: is it outside the realm of possibilities that an object of this size and shape could be attached to the belly of a plane of this type?
Well, that was amazing. William, I've got a text here from a viewer who says, if the planes that hit were not the passenger planes stated, did those planes take off? If so, where are the passengers and terrorists?
Well, my response to someone who says something like that is just go watch a TV program and I think you can figure it out. These guys work with an unlimited black operations budget. And I'm sorry to break it to the American people, but when you want to dispose of less than a couple of hundred passengers on those planes, there's ways to do it, guys. So where the passengers are, I have no idea. Where those actual planes are, I have no idea. But what we do know is that the official story that we're being given about those planes and some of these intricate details just don't add up. We know that Flight 93 landed in Ohio because they said there was a bomb feared aboard. This was a news report that came out on CNN. All right, and the mayor even confirmed it. So here we go again. Here's another inconsistent fact. One thing that's not in the documentary is we know that, or we've been told, and I won't say where we got this information from, but, we were told that the first two planes that hit the first two towers, we're talking about Flights 11 and Flight 175, there are reports that we believe that say those planes landed at an Air Force base and were offloaded, and those passengers were put aboard another plane. That's where the story ends. We don't know where it goes from there, but I think you can see where this goes.
Well, they're obviously not around anymore. I mean, their names were released, and their DNA was apparently identified at the Pentagon, but not at the Twin Towers. Is that correct?
I believe that is correct, yes.
That's the story, isn't it? I just wanted to ask you one more thing, because when we had a conversation on the phone yesterday, you mentioned something to me about people who might otherwise talk out about this, who were involved in some way unknowingly. Is there anything you want to say about that, William?
Well, people can't get a firm grasp around this thing, I don't think, because they may not understand the techniques that are used to keep people quiet. There are individuals out there who will say this is too big of a conspiracy to keep quiet, too many individuals would be involved, someone would speak out by now, and that's just not necessarily true. And it's not true because, I have contacts within the state and the federal government who have pointed me in a completely new direction. And I believe now that the war games that were being carried out that day, we're talking about Vigilant Warrior and, those three that were being carried out. One of those in particular, I believe Vigilant Warrior is the one where they were actually flying the planes into buildings. This was supposed to be simulated, but we know of 7 individuals who were in a room helping to remote control pilot those planes. They happened to look over at a television monitor because they were watching the ball game. They weren't supposed to have the TV, and they see, a plane is crashing into the tower, and the guy turns to someone else and says, "Man, this is great special effects. We've never had this before." They begin to realize very slowly over a 30-minute period of time, they've just killed all these people. They crashed planes into live targets. Okay? Those particular individuals wanted to speak out. They wanted to tell their story, but they were kept quiet by officials in our own government who ended up kidnapping the children. The youngest children from each family member was kidnapped. They won't speak out about it now. Most of them are very ill. They've all come down with the same symptoms. Sounds a lot like depleted uranium exposure or poisoning.
William,
these people are slowly dying off.
William, this is an extraordinary allegation. As far as I know, it's the first time it's ever been anywhere on the internet or broadcast. So
I've never talked about this before. I mean, we're trying to protect these people because out of the 7 children that were kidnapped, we know that 2 of them are already dead. We're trying to get the information, but we don't want to put in jeopardy those other 5 children.
Well, that is truly horrific. Let me just quickly go to my other 2 guests on the sofa here in the UK for a moment, just to reflect on that, if you would.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's completely believable. Possible.
Mm-hmm. I mean, we're dealing with people here. People very often ask the question, or they disbelieve that the government, or that members of the government, George Bush, whoever you want to blame, would actually do this, would kill their own people. Why would they kill their own people?
In cold blood.
Yes, how could they kill their own people? But what people have to understand is that there are a lot of scientific studies and psychological studies that have been done over the past 50 years that have fairly specifically identified a segment of the population, a small segment of the population, about 6% of the human population, who are essentially psychopaths. And that is to say that these are people who genetically, biologically, psychologically, are unable to feel empathy for another human being. They essentially have no conscience.
They could go and have breakfast after killing people. And
exactly.
Absolutely.
They simply don't have a conscience. And there have been a lot of studies done to show that this is a reality. If you then imagine that such people rise into positions of power and gather around them similar-minded people, well, you can imagine what they can do.
Yeah, and our great weakness is that we project what we couldn't do onto these people.
Exactly. When you think of a situation, you will automatically think to yourself, well, you will put yourself in that position and say, well, I couldn't do that. How could someone else do it? Well, you have to understand that not all people are created equal. Not all people are like you.
Simon, we've looked at who benefited, key bono, if you like, from what happened on 9/11. Was there any other group or nation that benefited?
Yeah, well, I'm glad you asked that, because it's fascinating. George Bush himself came out and said that there was a spy network operating inside the United States that was linked with the events of 9/11. And within a few months after 9/11 occurring, 200 spies were indeed thrown out of the United States.
From where?
From the state of Israel.
Israeli
they were all
spies?
Israeli spies.
Okay.
Now, you take that on its own, that's an interesting fact. But when you add in what's become known as the 5 dancing Israelis, which are the 5 gentlemen who were across the river from the Twin Towers on top of a van, filming the event and dancing, it would seem, for joy.
So they must have known in advance then, if they had all this...
Yeah, they did, and nicely, they've actually admitted to it, because once they were repatriated to Israel...
So they weren't arrested?
No, they were arrested and detained for a while, but then eventually they went back to Israel, just after a couple of months.
Mm-hmm.
They went onto Israeli television, and they said, we were there to document the event. That shows clear foreknowledge.
So why is this not on the BBC? Why is it not on NBC or ABC?
Look at who owns and controls the media.
Well, it's on the web as well. There's a journalist was quoted as saying that any investigation of Israeli spying in the US or Israeli involvement in 9/11 was considered in the media, in the mainstream media in the US, as career suicide.
This is extraordinary. I mean, tonight we've touched upon something that I've never heard before from William Lewis in America, who made 9/11 in plain sight, about these people who were, you know, they've had their children kidnapped in order to maintain their silence. We've heard that another state was involved in some way, possibly, potentially, with 9/11, if it was an inside job. You know, where does the rabbit hole end? How deep does this go?
Well, I think people need to understand that there is a war, but it's not a war on terror, it's a war of terror. And it's against us. It's against the people of the world, the ordinary people of the world. If you look at actually what's going on, to cut aside all the media, other than obviously this program, what is actually happening is we are losing our freedoms, we are losing our right to free movement, to remain anonymous in front of our governments, to all the things that are considered basic freedoms historically. And it all stems from 9/11. There is a war, and we are its victims. And people need to understand that.
So, OK, let me go back to William in America. William, you know, what about the Bill of Rights? What about the Constitution, you know, that was set up so well by the Founding Fathers? Is it all in tatters?
You know, we put out a documentary at the beginning of the year called Washington, You're Fired, and it covers everything that happened in the past 8 years under the Bush administration, after, you know, or the last 7 years after the September 11th attack. And just one bill after another is laid on the table, and we can show you, you know, how to connect the dots between all of those bills, between the Military Commissions Act and the Protect America Act and the USA Patriot Act, and every single one of these things that has been used to remove posse comitatus or habeas corpus, or, you know, our right to just simply have representation, or be able to go before a judge, or have an attorney, or know why you've been locked up. All these things have been removed from our Constitution, and it's turning into a situation where you know, we knew we were living in a fascist state, but now the average person, the common person, can look at all of these facts and say, hey, you know, wake up, you know, and begin to hopefully understand that they are a part of the system unless they withdraw their allegiance and their support. It's a hard sell. It's hard to make people change their reality, their concept of reality. Even when you look at one of these documentaries, you can only hope to shift someone's perspective approximately 10%. So, you know, you really have to look at a lot of this information, and people, I think when they see this for the first time, are intrigued because they can interpret photographs, they can interpret video footage, they can look at it for themselves and make up their own mind as to what they believe happened.
William, we've got 8 seconds before I've got to do my outro, but thank you so much for being on the show, and thank you to Joe and to Simon. It's been extraordinary. That's all we've got time for tonight. Thank you to everyone for watching. Thank you for those who sent in texts, and thanks to my special guests, William Lewis, Joe Quinn, Simon Davies. If you've enjoyed this show, tell all your friends. If you haven't, tell your enemies. Next week, we've got UFO investigator and author Richard D. Hall, who's making a series of extraordinary shows for this channel, so please do not miss it. We're also going to be showing, by the way, Washington, You're Fired very shortly. Until then, remember, they're watching you, watching us, watching them. Cheerio.